Okay, good evening once again. My name is Elisa Bunton, and I am the Director of Community Affairs at Illinois Institute of Technology. On behalf of IIT and the Chicago Quarterly Review, I welcome you to this program on this evening. I do know that you're in for a treat. We have wonderful selections that will be read for your hearing by some dynamic writers and speakers. Just to give you a sense of the format for the evening, we will have a facilitated discussion among the contributors to the Chicago Quarterly Review, edition number 33, and also with our commentator for the evening, Nora Brooks Blakely. From that conversation, we will move directly into the readings. From the readings, we then will transition to Q&A from our audience, and then we'll have our closing. So with that having been said, please put any questions that you have in the chat. I will mine the chat for questions as well as looking for you to raise your hand in the Zoom feature. Either way, I will find you and we will allow you to ask your question. But that having been said, we get to launch right into the discussion. And I am going to ask the first question, and contributors feel free to jump in whenever the spirit so moves you, understanding that you may not want to contribute to all of the questions. If you do, wonderful. If you don't, that's fine too. One may resonate more with you than the others. So first question, and I'm going to pose this to Nora and then open it up to the contributors. First and foremost, what is Black literature? Is Black literature anything that's written by a person of African descent? Did Black literature begin at a finite moment in time with a particular individual? Just what is Black lit? Nora, you take this one first. And did we lose Nora?
Oh, I also forgot to unmute. Okay, so when I hear the phrase Black literature, so many things come to mind. I mean, the oral traditions, the storytelling, the spoken word, the sacred elements, the spirituals, gospels, and sermons, the secular forms, such as lyrics of blues and jazz and the work songs, and of course, rhymes and rap and sermons and folk tales. All the historical pieces, the historical reveries, the soul-searching novels, and the poetry. And there's literature from so many different periods. In the United States, there's writings even during slavery. There's from Reconstruction, from Harlem Renaissance, the writings in the civil rights era of the 50s and 60s, the Black arts movement, and on and on. But I think it's important to say that since I said Black and not African American, that this literature spans the globe. So there have been so many arguments over what is Black theater, what is Black art, so what is Black literature? And I say, to simplify things, Black literature is whatever we say it is. And I know that's going to start a battle. And I know we've only got 5 minutes for the battle. So everybody grab your Band-Aids and everything. And what is your definition then of Black literature?
Well, I tend to agree with you with the last thing that you said about being anything, because when you look at this, you see such a diversity of Black writers doing everything. I mean, there are Afrofuturists, there are fantasy writers, there are all kinds of Black writers. So who happen to have African descent, which is what you said. But right now, I think what you described is a traditional type of Black literature, which is wonderful because we still use it. But we've gone on to another kind of diversity in the writing that might have to reflect more with what's going on in this century. So that's my view.
Okay.
I agree with you.
And so do I.
Next on that question.
You gave us a panorama of the basics and the variety. And like Sharon, I agree, because first of all, there's more diversity. We have Africans in America writing, and some of the hottest new stuff is by the newer African Americans. So a lot of us in the academy say Black Americans for those of us who are descendants of mixed enslaved Africans. But in terms of Black literature, we're all of that. And whether you're straight or gay or bi or whatever, but all of those elements come into play. But it's interesting to me that some of the new playwrights, some of the new fiction writers and essayists are actually Africans now joining us in the new world, in America, and adding to the panorama of the body of wonderful work our ancestors have created, and that some of us are talking back to and continuing those discussions.
Any of our other contributors want to jump in? Okay, I see Sahai wants to get in on the action. So Sahai, please unmute yourself and jump in the conversation.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you, Alicia, for making this possible, and also CQR. What a delight it is to be with all of you. And I would also like to echo what the other writers have said. This is really a both and situation. Black is not either or, it is both and in everything. And it's so amazing as we move from binary thinking to embrace multiple ways of thinking. Our literature will surely reflect that. Nora literally talked about a kind of a literary, a vocal diaspora with a bit of everything. And all of these are texts that constitute a larger understanding of Black literature. Thank you for that introduction, Nora. That was really powerful.
If we have no other takers for that question, let's move on to the importance of Black literature as representation of the ones represented. So Nora, unpack that. Why is it important?
Okay. If you look at people, I'm gonna jump back into the 20th century, and look at people like authors like Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes, who contributed works in which Blacks could see themselves, that they raised up our folklore, they raised up everyday people. If you look at somebody in the 21st century, like N.K. Jemisin, then you see somebody who has taken our stories and put them in a whole different light, in a whole different reality. And yet the words still ring true to what we as Black people are experiencing. You look at the Black arts movement and the politically charged expression, and many writers of the movement use that craft as weapons in a campaign to liberate Black America, and to reach ordinary people. And they went on, they took their poems and everything, and they went on the street. They took the poems into prisons and bars, and that is something that has continued to this day because of that process. So I would kick it back, rephrasing the question: is the theme of Black representation key to your work? And if so, why and in what way?
Sharon, do you want to take that?
I'm a little confused about the question, but I have a novel that came out a couple of years ago called Dancing with Langston, and in that the characters are Black. Obviously they represent Black people, but the story isn't along those traditional lines that I think that Nora was mentioning. It happens to be taking place in an apartment where gentrification is happening. So that in itself is showing, that it's a Black place. It's in Harlem. But the characters are dealing with other issues. They have to get out of the apartment. And they're dealing with their personal history as part of that, which is a kind of Black history. So I think that, yes, it represents Black people, but I'm not trying to have it represent all. It represents the characters who are in that work. That's all it is. Same thing with the piece I'm going to read. I worked in media, in journalism. So that's where mine comes from journalism, and how certain Black people are functioning in media. It's different from, I think, it's very different from the Black arts movement.
Mm-hmm. I do want to just jump in for one clarification and say that that N.K. Jemisin, for instance, is speculative fiction and in no way falls into the traditional patterns of Black literature. And yet when you read her work, you know that we are represented. And I guess that is the question, the importance to the people who are being represented, of going, oh, I see myself, here, even if the people were not specifically Black American people or even Black people from Earth, So, but I think, yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because I'm not saying that everybody has to do a standard piece of these Black people are representing us as Black people. I wasn't trying to say that. So.
Well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Levan.
I have read some really awful books just because they included Black gay men. I just said, okay, great. I've stayed up all night reading those books. And so I understand. I understand how important it is for me to be included in things, but I also read a lot of work just because I don't know anything about it and I want to learn about it. I read, and I think that's really important. I remember I was in the library one day and I was sitting next to this young man. He was at a stall looking at the television, and I was at my little stall reading. And I noticed that he was about 11, and all his books were they were about gay people. And I said, wow, that's really good. And he gets to read some really good books today. So that's why it's important for me to take time to expose myself. I want to be part of things. I want to expose myself, and I want to learn. I don't mind picking up a book where I don't know anything and learning something to see the commonality I have with various cultures.
Thank you for that. And I think what we're all saying is, and what CQ, and thank you. I'm very honored to be in this issue, the Anthology of Black American Literature. There is no one standard. We are all different. It's like the mother fatherland. There's multiple cultures, multiple kingdoms, multiple peoples, multiple languages. And even throughout the whole world where there are Black people, we are so much more alike than we are different. And this anthology says that again and again and again. The variety is wonderful. You can't say you're going to expect one thing. And I'm so honored to be a part of that. It's a testimony to our evolution as a people, what we've done in the New World, how we've made sweet lemonade with the worst sour lemons possible. So I congratulate all of you for doing that, and thank you for letting me join you in this, and for being here tonight. It's a celebration of all the varieties we are, and Charles Johnson said it best in the opening. It's not what you expect, but it's delightful.
Sahai, would you like to add to the conversation?
I'm not sure I have much more to add, but that I think it's just extraordinary to be able to see many different shades of Black, many different colors of Black, many different contexts. And I, for one, am thrilled that some of the stereotypes, if you will, some of the restrictions that that we really work to unshackle our voices and our tongues have really opened up, I think, a whole new era of writing. 50, 60 years ago, we wouldn't even think of an Octavia Butler or an MK, and now there are many people, Samuel Delany, many people who wrote for years under obscurity, whose works were not published until much, much later, Lovecraft et al. So for one thing, I feel very hopeful about Black literature and its many tongues and its many tales and many stories to tell.
And that's a beautiful segue to the next topic, which is talking about the importance of Black writers and what specifically do they bring to the table and what have they brought to the table. You mentioned Octavia Butler. You know, she's the mother of Black science fiction, particularly with women as the protagonists. But I'm not on the panel, so I'm going to let you answer that question.
Okay, so guess who I'm going to talk about? Yep, that's right, Gwendolyn Brooks. I think that she is such a major figure in Black literature, in American literature, in women's literature, in 20th century literature, because she crossed so many literary periods. I mean, she was first published in the 1930s, but countless writers from the Black arts movement claim her as a mentor, a mother figure, as well as a participant of the period. She was, as many people know, she was the first Black person to ever win the Pulitzer Prize for anything. She won countless other awards and was the poetry consultant for the Library of Congress just before they renamed it the position Poet Laureate. So she was also the Poet Laureate of Illinois for 31 years. And to my knowledge, that's the longest run of a Poet Laureate in the country. And if that's incorrect, somebody please let me know so that I won't keep saying that. But I think that for those reasons or for so many more, that's why she is a standout name in Black literature. There's a Native American saying from the Dakota people, "We will be known forever by the tracks we make." And so my question, kicking it back, is who are the Black writers that you think have left tracks by which they'll be known forever, and why?
I'll jump back in here. First of all, I'd have to say, Gwendolyn Brooks. This was the first book of poetry I got along with Phyllis Wheatley. And I can remember opening that book and going, oh my, this is somebody who looks like my family, who looks like the people I know, who's talking about things that are important. Certainly no conversation goes in literature goes without saying for the incredible Holy Mother, Toni Morrison, who upended the canon in ways that we're still trying to decipher. I taught the novels of Toni Morrison at Cook County Jail for 5 years. And I will tell you, in that context, it was the first time, even though I read every novel in the canon, teaching that novel in prison gave me a profoundly new understanding of every one of those books, even if I read them 5 or 6 times. Closer to home, Cyrus Coulter, Leon Forrest, the list just goes on, but there's so many who have laid the tracks for us, who have, as Marlon Riggs once said, our tongues are untied now. And to be able to untie our tongue. And I will tell you, sometimes when I lecture, I use the image of the bit that was put on our ancestors. And every time I sit down at the computer, every time I teach a class, every time I read something, that image just comes through my mind. You know, I can now speak what my ancestors could not speak. My tongue is untied. What will happen next? So it's like this opening. And again, just far too many people to even mention here, but I think the greatest gift that we can give them is to keep reading and to discover new writers and to share those books with others. Share a book, send one. I empty my library periodically and leave books in the laundry room. I leave books on the train. I am the book fairy, okay? But share.
Mona Lisa, are you clapping at the book fairy? Okay. Can you also dip your feet into this part of the conversation?
Well, I share that thrill for books because like you, and look, this is rebuilding a library after I lost over 5,000 books that drowned in Katrina. But I gift books to my students that way. If they're interested and they're curious, I gift books all the time. And they're the next generation. And I'm honored to say I've taught generations for decades. And so it's been a big responsibility. So I make sure, and my mentors did that to me, including Charles Johnson, Colleen McElroy, Roger Kamenetz, Vance Borgelli. I mean, so many others. I mean, if they had something and I was curious, they said, here, take mine or take this. And so I do that. So I love that. I love that idea. And I work with the Neighborhood Association, and we focus on literacy, and we're always giving away award-winning books to families. So we do that in the neighborhood as well. So I love that and admire that. So Miss Bear, an angel, a book angel. God bless you.
And that brings us to the importance of Black literature to young people. Nora, I know that your mom has written several books for young people, but can you speak a little bit about the importance of Black literature to young people?
I think, yes, and besides, of course, Mama, I think of Walter Dean Myers, Jan Spivey Gilchrist, Eloise Greenfield, Julius Lester, Ashley Bryan, W.E.B. Du Bois, so some people don't know that he created the Brownies magazine, which was for young people and was first published in 1920. Tom and Muriel Felix, Faith Ringgold, John Steptoe. These are just such a small part of the authors and illustrators, the Black authors and Black illustrators, and important in Black literature. And the best way I can describe the importance of Black literature to young people is I ran a theater company for 29 years, Chocolate Chips Theater Company. And just before we started that company, there was another group that would go around, and we would go around and perform. And sometimes happens, the teachers would have the kids send thank yous, and sometimes they draw little pictures and say, oh, thank you so much for coming to our school, and really nice things like that. And one day I noticed something, and I just started tearing up, because usually, especially 20, 30 years ago, kids would draw just the little circles for the faces and everything. But because they had seen us, perform, they shaded the circles brown. They colored the faces in. And so my reason about the importance of Black literature is for children to be able to color the faces in. So a question for me is, what book by a Black children's author and or illustrator greatly impacted you as a child or as an adult?
I think for me, it was there are two books, and one was I think it was Leo and Diane Dillon, The African Alphabet.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, that book, my daughter just loved that book, and I was so struck at the elegant pictures, at the specificity of detail. And my son, I will tell you, in sixth grade, discovered our bookshelf, and we had a bookshelves without boundaries, as my parents did. My parents were bibliophiles, and everything was on the bookshelf. I remember trying to read Look Homeward, Angel at like 11 years old, because I thought it was a religious book, but they didn't tell us what we could or could not read. So it was a bookshelf without borders. So when my 11, 12-year-old discovered Charles Johnson's Middle Passage and insisted upon reading it, he went to sleep with that book. He got up in the morning with that book. He was on the school bus with that book. He wrote a newspaper about that book. And I don't think I'd ever seen a young Black boy with a book that completely transformed him. He couldn't understand half of the Latin references, and there was so much that was over his head, but he knew the story in that book because he saw himself a projected self, not to mention it starting in New Orleans and all of that. But I remember what an incredible joy it was to tell Charles that this was the book that transformed my young son's life. Now, he had a big Black library, huge library, but that book was something that just catapulted him into the world of reading, unlike any book he'd read at that time. I'm not just polishing apples. He will tell you, I still have all of his memorabilia about that book and what it meant for him.
Sahi, what's the name of that book again? What's the title? Miss Hebert.
There were two books. First of all, Charles Johnson's Middle Passage.
Okay.
It may have been published under a different title, if I'm not mistaken. And we've given that book to many, many different people who are just reading. And for my daughter, as a young reader, it was The African Alphabet, and I think it was illustrated by Leo and Diane Dillon.
Yeah.
course, mom still has those books. They will be given to my grandchildren one day, courtesy of the book fairy grandmother.
Thank you.
All right.
My experience is very different because my dad is the reason I'm a writer and that I own books. Anything I didn't know on the news, I had to look up. And we had the American People's Encyclopedia and 2 dictionaries and the Reader's Digest. And so I read, but I didn't have children's books when I was a kid. I had the storytelling of my papa, my maternal grandfather, who was born enslaved in Alabama and walked to New Orleans to be free. I heard that all my life. And I had him doing that till I was a teenager. And when he passed away, then the neighborhood library that finally we could walk to during the end of Jim Crow, then children's books became a whole new world for me. But before that, it was the Ori storytelling, toasting, ribbing, dozens, you name it, they did it. Sidewalk songs, jump rope rhymes, clap hand games. We did all of that stuff. Gospel. Oh my God. Just the oral tradition was my introduction, but certainly my dad was a reader. And so I have both the oral tradition and a reading background. But in my family, the book I gift to the teenage girls is Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, because I want them to understand the complexity of that era we call the transatlantic enslavement period. I want them to know not only their value, but their young womanhood in a way that often parents don't tell them. And they never forget it. So it's a bit different than I think what you're asking, but we're all different.
I think that's why that's such an important story to tell.
All right. This concludes the discussion portion amongst our contributors. And we are going to go right into the readings by the contributors to the CQR. Right now, I'm going to read the bio for Miss Sahai Geraldine Hebert. And after I've finished reading her bio, hers will be the next speaking voice that you hear. Sahai Geraldine Hebert is a bona fide gumbo girl, triaged between her father's rural Pointe-Coupée family seat, her Baton Rouge birthplace, and her mother's beloved New Orleans. Hebert's works are steeped in place and history. The second great daughter of Louisiana Creole storyteller Dorlis Aguillard, Hebert honors the family's Afro-Creole culture and traditions. The Northwestern University and School of the Art Institute alum chronicles her deep affection for the city in the Chicago Quartet, set in an iconic neighborhood and era. Each work earned distinction, including winning the 11th Annual Alliance Candida National Graduate Playwriting Competition. The first African American woman and person with a disability to do so, she is also a Sundance Theater Lab finalist, a 3 Arts UI Disability Fellow, and a Vermont Studio Center Voices Rising Fellow. She is one of 80 poets selected internationally to celebrate Gwendolyn Brooks' 80th birthday. So we thank you so much for being with us tonight, Sahai, and we look forward to your readings.
Thank you. Tonight I'm reading a selection from the anthology, and I'm reading from the short story Off the Wall. Armed with a self-righteous can of paint in one hand, The lady in the flat, sensible shoes made a beeline from the automotive store on the corner, the Evanston side. Items purchased on one side of the street couldn't be purchased legally across the street. On the Chicago side, just yards away, a can of paint, the least of them. On one side of the street, there were lawns, a garden, and sweet shops, stores full of 100 choices of food, shoes, food, and more. But not on that side. On that side, there were corner stores and fast food shops, wig and weaving shops, bars carried over from earlier, more lucrative times, sat next to jerk after jerk after jerk shop, a taco stand, and a shady store rumored to sell mostly stolen goods. With only 4 choices, red, white, black, and silver, Josie said, white. White, she said, as crisp as the name implied. The sound of a sheet drying, wind whipped on a perfect sunny day. Its corners popped for good measure. Black and gray were too maudlin, red was a bit too violent. The other cans held in her bosom like an amulet. She walked right up to the large marks covering one side of the fast food joint. The marks were painted by his boys. His posse commemorated the lives lost, no matter the affiliation, age, which side of town, caste, or class. There was no reason, concept, or ideology that explains or condones murder, save for self-defense. And one better be careful with that. Given the circumstances, the time of day, the zip code, and other factors like the color of your work clothes and your skin, it could go either way. As soon as she began to spray paint, a person or two stopped by. One passerby and then another shouted out to her, "Go on ahead, that's right. Somebody ought to do it. No need, no need. Stop all of that foolishness. It's a damn shame." What the? Rising and swelling, the chorus assembling and dissembling behind her, each had a commentary, but Josie sprayed and sprayed. Then silence. Dead silence. Just like the kid who'd been shot the night before, a week before, the month, and the others the year before, a block away from Josie's home at that intersection. By the time Josie got to the second can, shaking it as furiously as she had the first, 2 more stopped to watch. From the corner of her eye, sliding it as far to the right as she could without turning around, she scanned left, right, up, down, and she continued to spray and spray and The third can emptied. There were now maybe a half dozen murmuring behind her, a low, unsettling rumbling. Sick and tired. I am sick and tired of the killing. These are our children, not other people's children, our children. That was somebody's child. Every day I hustle off to teach adverbs and verbs, and only to learn that another one is gone. Another Bearden, another Michaud, another Jackie, another Guy, another Rosa, Octavia, a Bayard. How many times? She shut the voices up in her head. Someone close enough to violate personal
Can't believe you hijacked my earpod.
stood close by, but she
As
would.
soon as you dial that number, my earpod.
It was a man. You don't have to see them to know they're there. She sprayed and sprayed over signs and symbols, signals that only one group owned that block, when all of them put together couldn't buy enough cemetery plots to bury half of the people murdered in gang violence, or let alone put that energy to use someplace else. Do you know what you're doing? The voice assured and in command. She slid her eye, navy blue, but she kept on spraying. The black turned gray and now smeared ghost text easing forward and dripping down from beneath the white spray. Yes, she said without even looking up. My children stand here. They take the bus on this corner. They walk down this street. When we visit our friends, this cannot happen here. Ma'am, the blue uniform carefully enunciating each word. It's a memorial, ma'am, for the deceased. Well, this is for all of us who have lost our precious children. Why do we have to have a memorial in the first place? Well, that's why what I want to paint away, not the memorial, but the reason why our children are dying. Ma'am, quieter than before. You just painted over the memorial for a member of a street organization, and his friends are standing behind you. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Sahai. Please see my hand clap, and I know that there are other people giving you virtual rounds of applause. Our next reading will come from Sharon Skeeter. Sharon Skeeter was fiction, poetry book, Sharon Skeeter was fiction, poetry, book review editor at Essence Magazine and editor-in-chief at Black Elegance Magazine. She taught at colleges and universities in the Northeast. She's been published in magazines, journals, and anthologies. Dancing with Langston, her debut novel, received the 2019 Gold Forward Review's Indies Book of the Year Award in Multicultural Adult Fiction. She has participated in literary events in the United States, India, and Singapore. She's on the boards of ACT Theater and Hugo House in Seattle. Her anthology, What's Next? Short Fiction in the Time of Change, will be out next June. The Comeback is an excerpt from her novel In Progress.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. This is, The Comeback was a longer piece in the anthology, and what I've done here is I've abridged it a bit for the time. So this is the short version. So this man in skinny black chinos, a red and black tee, and a baggy black leather jacket was Duke Anthony. He was no longer my cousin Darnell, on Thelma's boy, the scrawny teen I was awed by when I was a kid. I stopped staring and smiled tentatively as he slowly pranced to the front platform where I stood. A few months ago, he called to let Velma know he'd be here for the movie. She told him about my New Millennium gift to myself, this public relations agency that I was starting with my fiance Tanner's help. Darnell wanted to be my first client. I was ecstatic. But here he was, taking his time, talking to friends who called him Duke A as he walked toward me late. But why did he bring his girlfriend? She, McKenna, was grinning behind him, feigning modesty like his tall shadow in her all-black jumpsuit and pulled back braids. But as Duke Anthony passed them, the reporters, both men and women, were really craning their necks to see her, McKenna, the one-name rising star, latest cover girl on every newsstand. Frankly, I was pissed. I knew his flight from LA had arrived hours ago, so I'd hoped he'd get here early. To buy time, I'd been going person to person, talking up his movie, Two Guns. By now, the photographers had eaten all the snacks that my assistant Raya had put out on the table. It was after work and the reporters were restless. I'd been worried that the TV entertainment news crew at the side of the platform might leave. When he finally got to the edge of the low platform, I gasped. In the spotlight, his face was gaunt, with coal black lines where he used to have full eyebrows. I admit, as a teen, I envied him. A thick blanket of pasty tan makeup and dark contouring cream covered his skin. What had happened to his smooth penny brown complexion? McKenna propped his arm as he stepped up to me. Hey, cuz. I gave them my best public relations smile. Hey, it's been years, Duque. I rushed them to a folding chair next to the studio podium that he had requested. He held the chair arms as he sat. I saw a few sweat beads leaking through the makeup on his forehead. I hoped his face would hold together under the lights. My notes shook in my hand as I walked to the platform and walked to the podium. This was the moment, the start of my own public relations business. I wished I had time to savor it. Hello to all of you who just arrived. I'm Malika Shea Thornton. Thanks for coming. This is what you've all been waiting for. Duke Anthony is back. You saw the trailer. You know he's blazing in two guns. I thought there might be some smiles, head nods, any nonverbal response, but nothing. These reporters had seen and heard it all, rigid patience about them, dead silence. But now let's get right to it and hear from Duke Anthony. I sat on the other side of the podium. Duke Anthony's wide smile was frozen on his face as he pushed himself on the chair arms to stand. Then he looked down and took a half step to the podium. A few cameras clicked as he paused, looking out at the press. This surprised me. His pause, though it lasted only a few seconds, made my stomach churn. I saw McKenna silently mouthing what seemed to be, "You can do it." That worked. He regained his posture as he took two more steps. He gripped both sides of the podium. Hey, I'm glad to be home, New York. I'm glad to see so many friends here. His voice began to waver, even some old friends. He looked at the reviewer in the second row with the bebop cap, the older man who had trashed his last movie about 8 years ago. That review hurt Duke Anthony so bad that he didn't get a starring role until now, and only when his manager got some movie buddy of his to take pity on him. This was really his last chance. He had to take hold of it, or he'd be back doing voiceovers and commercials. The reviewer smirked. A heavy-set middle-aged woman in a blue suit, a latecomer fan who must have snuck in the back row, stood up and yelled, "I love you, Duke Anthony." McKenna's eyes glared at Duke Anthony and became pinpricks as her head, braids flying, jerked toward the back. A younger woman near the aisle, hair in a side flip, giggled and said loudly, "Nice try," as the woman passed. The love you woman, humiliated, had sheepishly covered her face with her purse, then crawled over the laughing man next to her and skulked out the back door. With that distraction, I didn't see why Tanner was pointing and running toward me on the platform. McKenna was half standing and panting, and some in the audience mumbled, "Oh my God." In the next moment, I felt Duke Anthony leaning over me and saw him losing his grip on the podium. His legs wobbled, then straightened as he opened his mouth to speak. Instead, his chest rounded over the microphone. When his jacket rubbed it, the speakers blasted a loud buzz. The podium shook but stayed upright. By reflex, I shut out my arms to stop his fall. But Tanner, a former halfback, was faster, and just before Duke Anthony could hit the floor, he caught him. For a quick moment, I was stunned and still. Then I stood and pushed my chair closer to the podium. He was limp when Tanner gently sat him there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Again, I am sure behind these blackened screens that there's a round of virtual applause that is going on. Okay. Our next reader, who was not published in the CQR, but will be reading nonetheless, is Nora Brooks Blakely. Nora Brooks Blakely, a former teacher in the Chicago Public Schools, founded Chocolate Chips Theater Company and was its primary playwright. Miss Blakely is the daughter of two writers, Henry Blakely and Gwendolyn Brooks. She founded Brooks Permissions in 2001. The company licenses and promotes her mother's work and develops programming and publications which demonstrate Gwendolyn Brooks' continuing relevance. Nora's first picture book, Moyenda and the Golden Heart, is an origin tale for Kwanzaa. It will be released this fall.
Thank you. And that's a wonderful segue because that's what I will be reading, Moyenda and the Golden Heart. I am the representative, the fan of children's literature for the evening. Once, far from now, but close to then, a little boy was found in a forest. His name was Moyenda. His new parents, Bolade and Hassani, brought him home to a place called Village. And every year they celebrated the change and joy of a family of two becoming a family of three. Wrapped within the love of Village, Moyenda learned as he grew. He discovered his favorite foods were hot plantain cakes and hot fish stew. He learned about working hard. He learned fun and celebration were important too. And this year, what a celebration there would be. 7 was an important number in Village, and it had been 7 years since the day of Moyenda's finding. All the villagers planned to make it a great day because they loved Moyenda's kind, helpful ways. They loved a good party too. But sometimes life does not travel the road we plan. Oh no, for the next day, Moyenda woke to a stir and a whir. Merchants were there, merchants with many marvelous things from beyond Village, tools and carvings, fabrics and spices, medicines and news about a tremendous search for the Golden Heart. Villagers huzzed and buzzed, then spoke in hush and hum until waves of whispers settled into a wide, flat sea of silence. That's when the merchants shared the legend. A treasure that can't be sold, that's the precious heart of gold. If this wonder you will find, you must use your soul and mind. Moyenda listened with eager ears to the telling and the talking. Can't be sold? Could gold not be sold for seed and need? What a treasure this treasure would be. Moyenda remembered his mother singing about a famed wise woman named Aquila. Moyenda thought, maybe Aquila could tell him where to find the Golden Heart. Then he remembered his father saying, first decide, then do. Moyenda nodded. Decision made. Discover the Golden Heart and bring it back to Village. Although his parents were worried about what might discover Moyenda before he discovered this treasure, they were very proud of his courage. And the next morning, with food, good wishes, and everything else the villagers thought he would need, Moyenda picked up the staff he had carefully carved and set out on his journey. Moyenda walked. It was a long road, but birds chirped hellos and Friendly wind-waved grasses cheered him along his way, walking, walking. In the distance, he saw a band of withering trees. But wait, what was that bumpy lump in the road? A moving lump. Mayenda hurried closer as a young man helped a mother-aged woman lying on the ground. Mayenda listened to the story of the son and mother being robbed. He gave the wearied pair some of his coins and wrapped the woman's ankle. He even gave her his sturdy staff to aid her walking. They thanked him, insisting he take fruit gathered from their harvest. As they talked, Mayenda spoke of his search for Aquila. The two travelers stared at him in surprise. They had heard legends of this astonishing woman too. The son, pointing to the far off trees, some said she lived beyond the forest of fear. The mother warned Mayenda to be careful. She shared stories about those who entered that forest. They came out changed. But Mayenda was too excited to worry. He hurried along with thoughts of the ways the Golden Heart could help village. He took a deep breath of bravery and, armed with nothing but his courage, stepped into the forest. But before Mayenda had gone more than a few steps, a fog of grim green mist reached out with smoky fingers. Then he heard something peculiar. He heard footsteps. He heard voices. Tum, 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 here we come. Flee, flee, flee! You won't want to see our monstrous band marching through the land. Suddenly, hundreds of hot-eyed, fearful creatures appeared. Mayenda cried out for help. Watu, Watu, Saidi Andana. Watu, Watu, Saidi Andana. He hoped someone, somewhere would hear. And magically, the forest filled with people. All the people Mayenda helped. All the people he loved. There, his parents. There, more villagers. There, the mother and son he helped on the road. The little fear-filled creatures were so terrified, they ran away. Everybody cheered. The monsters were gone, and light flowed into the forest. The soft glow grew, and the crowd rippled open. An ancient stood in a clearing. It was Aquila, the wise woman, gray and graceful. Mayenda was overjoyed. A woman of such great age must have great wisdom as well. He rushed to her saying, surely you know where the Golden Heart can be found. But Mayenda, a smile spread across Aquila's face. You have found it for yourself. The love and friendship shown here today, that is the only treasure that cannot be sold. As Mayenda thought about Aquila's words, he remembered the traveler's tale. People were changed by the forest, but not to horror or to hurt. No, this change was, all eyes went wide with wonder. Each elder, each parent, each child now had a softly beating golden heart for all to see. They rejoiced in this change, promising they would come together every year. A family of few becoming a family of many. And yes, there would be plenty of Mayenda's favorites, plantain cakes and hot fish stew, to celebrate their wonderful new tradition. And that is what we do today. 7 special days remind us of the caring and cooperating we need to show each other all year. Every Kwanzaa, we celebrate the joys of working together, eating together, planning together, and just plain being together. Harambe! Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I am sure that there's virtual applause happening right now in the virtual house. Our next reader will be LaVan Hawkins. LeVan Hawkins, a Chicago-based performance artist and published poet and writer. His prose has appeared in such publications as Chicago Quarterly Review, Lunch Ticket Literary Journal, EDNA, Bleed Literary Blog, LA Times, LA Weekly, Santa Fe Reporter, Sacramento News and Review, and Children of the Dream, Our Own Stories of Growing Up Black in America. He is the winner of the 2019 Great River Writers Retreat Contest. Some of LeVan's fellowships include the Lambda Literary, Millet, Marble House Project, and the McDowell. He received his BFA from the Goodman School of Drama of the Art Institute of Chicago and his MFA from Antioch University, LA. Currently, he is working on What Men Do, a memoir. LeVan?
Thank you. This is from this is the beginning of my story, Both Sissies. It's Friday evening, over 4 decades ago. I'm at my church for our weekly junior usher board meeting, preparing for the upcoming junior Sunday services. On the third Sunday of every month, junior church members aged 7 to 18 took over the adults' duties. The junior choir in vivid purple robes sang modern gospel songs, and the junior ushers stood in the church foyer, warmly greeting church members and visitors as we passed out offering envelopes, handheld cardboard fans printed with the face of Dr. King, and church programs that listed that Sunday's order of service. The junior ushers were easy to spot in our usher uniforms. The boys in crisp white dress shirts, black clip-on ties, black pants, and black dress shoes. The girls wearing fancy white blouses with frilly bows, black skirts, and shiny black patent leather shoes. We steered the attendees into the sanctuary, where they were greeted by a junior usher standing in the center of the aisle. Right hand extended in welcome, left hand behind their back. They executed a sequence of precise, well-choreographed moves that welcomed church members and visitors, then directed them to their seats. Later during the services, we collected the membership offerings with the same sense of purpose, precision, and showmanship, then brought the gold-plated collection plates to the prayer table in front of the altar, left hands behind our backs, right hands holding the collection plates at our waists. As the minister began our offering prayer, every usher standing in the sanctuary, in the aisles, posted at the exits, would take their cue from the ushers standing before the prayer table as they emphatically dropped their hands to their sides in unison, raised and crossed their arms at their chests, then finally bowed their heads in prayer. Extended hands, graceful turns on the soles of our freshly polished shoes. These stylish maneuvers originated at a Black Baptist church in Chicago, less than a half-hour's drive from my church in Robbins, a predominantly Black Chicago South suburb. Representatives of various usher boards, officers, junior supervisors, and in many cases, the usher board's most graceful members traveled across Chicagoland, where they were taught these procedures along with a series of hand signals that enabled the ushers to communicate while going about their business. The number of workshops grew rapidly. Soon, the trainers were supplying rudimentary training manuals for their trainees to distribute amongst the usher board they represented. At our usher board meetings, we studied the manuals and repeatedly went over the moves described and illustrated until we had converted them into dazzling live perfection. Quickly, this dynamic new style of welcoming church members and visitors became so popular, it was used in Black churches across the United States. That Friday evening, 40 years ago at junior board rehearsal, I couldn't muster a new sequence of moves our trainer, president, dictator for life, 17-year-old Robert Monroe was teaching us. Our moves needed to be precise and synchronized. Every time we went through them, I was a few seconds off. Every time. I was 15 years old and the only member of the junior ushers board who couldn't keep up out of everyone, including the 7-year-olds, the 8-year-old boy with polio, and to Mr. Perry, our 70-something supervisor. My feet began to shake. I could feel the sweat of humiliation draining down my face as my legs spasmed. Wrong, 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 Robert yelled at me. What kind of sissy are you? Robert took special delight in harassing me. He knew how uncomfortable I was interacting with him, and he knew I hate being called a sissy. I was doing everything I could to squelch that description. My mannerisms were subtler than Robert's, something I thought made me more acceptable than him, until one of my high school classmates sat across from me in our crowded cafeteria and loudly told everyone in the vicinity of our table that unlike Robert, I was a sophisticated sissy, one who couldn't be detected on first glance, but was a sissy just the same. My classmate explained in front of everyone, but as if I wasn't there. If you watched me closely, the sensual way I rocked my ass against the gymnasium wall and waited for jockstrap inspection, yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. Points deducted if it was dirty, double points off if you weren't wearing one. If you watched the way my hand fluttered when I was annoyed and attempting to shoo everyone away, according to my classmates, only sissies shooed, you'd know I was a male of the sissy Sally Ferry variety. After all the work I've done, I still behaved like a sissy. At the very least, I thought I had made the transition from sophisticated sissy, my classmate's description, not mine, to nice but cool dude. Cool with a K, like cool cigarettes. I gave my voice edge when I spoke, dropping F-bombs and making sure when I tossed out motherfucker, it was mother and fucker, not motherfucker. Oh, you cool now, huh? The best football player in the history of my high school asked me. In reflection, perhaps there was some sarcasm in his voice. When he spotted me wearing one of my recent purchases from an urban store in the city, which is what cool people call Chicago. My idea to wear the kind of clothes the cool kids wore instead of wearing tight high water pants riding my ass was paying off. Soon I would be just another dude, my past clothing choices forgotten. That day in the cafeteria was a setback, yes, but I vowed not to give up. The next day in gym class, I stood up straight for jockstrap inspection. So straight, my spine began to ache. I had no choice but to roll it out on the wall, sighing in relief as 40 teenage boys eyeballed me. Yes, the Sissy Sally Berry variety. Here's the difference between Robert and me. I did everything I could to fit in. Robert did everything he could to stand out. A few weeks before this particular junior usher board meeting, Robert had gone to our sister school to pick up Michael Washington, our church organist. For the occasion, Robert wore a woman's black fur coat that stopped midway his knees and ankle, large round women's sunglasses, and a bright red turban and matching gloves. No one would ever accuse Robert of being a sophisticated sissy. Even if I owned that outfit, I would have known better than to wear it to a high school in the south suburbs of Chicago. The high waters I wore before I turned cool were an accident. It had never occurred to me to wear something loose. I simply had to learn different behavior. A red turban with matching red gloves, that was no accident. Robert knew what he was doing. Then maybe he didn't. Maybe he did as everyone else did, instinctively gravitated to whatever attracted him, never realizing there were observers who would vehemently object to his choices. Dozens of laughing students gathered around him that day, branding him in case he had forgotten he was a male of the Sissy Sally variety. A security guard had to break up the crowd. Though there was no social media then, word quickly got around about Robert's outfit and how he was taunted. Today, the incident would have gone viral. A video of Robert's outfit and the harassment he endured all over Instagram and Facebook. Some posters mocking him, others angry at his homophobic tormentors. When I first heard the news, I wondered how Michael reacted when he saw Robert. Had he seen him and thought, what the hell? Had he worried people would see them walking together and think he was gay? Had anyone harassed him? Had he stood up for Robert? Had he gotten so accustomed to Robert's ensembles, he simply saw what Robert was wearing as another one of his outrageous outfits? I couldn't be seen with Robert except while performing usher duties at church. My mother demanded my brother and I stay away from that Monroe boy who couldn't make up his mind whether he's a boy or girl. Secondly, I felt I had done way too much work transforming myself to negate it by associating with Robert. If we were together, he would inevitably draw everyone's attention, and then they would broaden their lens and close in on me. And as my classmates said in the cafeteria, in front of everybody, all would be revealed. Wrong, 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 Robert yelled as I tripped over my feet. While he barked at me, I had flashbacks of being humiliated at the local YMCA when it took me all summer to progress from guppies to beginners in swim class, something the six boys in my neighborhood did the first day we attended. I saw the exasperated and repulsed face of my older cousin when after weeks of his instruction, I still couldn't ride the new bike I received for Christmas, while my brother, 13 months younger, hopped on it, pedaled, and sped off. Amateur, Robert yelled. I am not an amateur, Madam President. Your moves suck. Everyone in the sanctuary, including Mr. Perry, gasped. No one, including Mr. Perry, dared defy Robert. Suddenly, a black flash is heading toward my face. I duck as a Bible missiles over my head. The word of God rocketing over me at 1,000 miles an hour. I was one Bible verse away from being decapitated. The Holy Book has a lot of pages. You almost hit me, I yelled at Robert. If I wanted to hit you, I would have. He snaps his fingers in front of my face for emphasis when he says I would have. The finger snaps sounding through the sanctuary like gunshots. I had to duck to stop from being hurt. Nice reflexes. You hear him? I angrily asked Mr. Perry. He said he wasn't trying to hit you, Levan. Mr. Perry answers meekly. I loved Mr. Perry, but he was no match for Robert and wasn't good for anything but calling 911 the day Robert finally decapitated me. Robert was always throwing Bibles at me. I was the only one who defied him, the only one who desperately needed to maintain a distance between us. I thanked God for Robert's hate, but that night, I had enough. Forget my tormentors who ridiculed me and robbed me of my lunch money, and the ones who made me do their homework. Robert was my number one nemesis. That year, we did everything but arch our backs and hiss at each other. It was one outrage after another, and when I thought it couldn't get any worse, he modeled at our church's biggest event, the annual Palm Sunday fashion show and tea, and ruined my show that I waited all year to attend. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Levan. Thank you. Again, I know there's virtual applause going on right now, and some applause in real time as well. Our final reader for the evening is Dr. Mona Lisa Saloy. Mona Lisa Saloy, PhD, author, folklorist, educator, and scholar of Creole culture in articles, documentaries, and poems about New Orleans before and after Katrina, is currently Conrad N. Hilton Endowed Professor of English at Dillard University and Louisiana Poet Laureate. Her first book, Red Beans and Ricely Yours, won the T.S. Eliot Prize and the Penn Oak Josephine Miles Award. Her second Line Home, celebrates New Orleans Black Creole culture. Saloy's screenplay, Easter Rock, premiered at the Ethnograph Film Festival, Paris. Mona Lisa Saloy writes for those who don't or can't tell Black Creole cultural stories. You may visit her at www.monalisasaloy.com or on Twitter at Red Bean Sister. Mona Lisa.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you for everything, for organizing this, and Gary, thank y'all. And again, it is an honor for me to be here and to share my work. I'll frame the two pieces that appear in the CQR issue with one from my second book and then ending with one from my first book. So the first poem is, so 4 poems total. See you in the gumbo. Soon as humidity rears its head in mid-May, we smell the rainy season coming. Got to get out the grill, stoke some coals, braise some shrimp, soak red beans, steam that rice, enjoy galleries, yards, back porches, party with the DJ spinning Johnny Adams. Tell it like it is. Dance like nobody's there, dance like nobody's there. Spring spreads aphids on roses, something about the morning mist, a kiss to every blade of grass and iris bud. Graduations grow like mushrooms in spring. By Memorial Day, backyard barbecues rise like the sun beaming everywhere. Folks don't make no never mind about June 1st, hurricane hype from TV weather watchers. Just count flashlights, candles in jars, canned tuna, peanut butter, water, bottled, jugged, stacked in cases, party with family crooners, dance like nobody's there, dance like nobody's there. Atlantic and Gulf waters stir first swirls. Daily news broadcasts brace for tropical storms turning into hurricanes. Hurry now, stock up on supplies. Storm warnings rise like cream in cafe au lait. Folks don't make no never mind about hurricane season starts. We joke about Hurricane Betsy, whose waters flowed down streets like a parade, with floating bodies of dogs, cats, people, shrimp, swollen, stinky. We party. Shake off the coat of fear with a DJ spinning Joe Jones. You talk too much, you worry me to death. You talk too much, you even worry my pet. Dance like nobody's there. Dance like nobody's there. Gas up the car, pack emergency lights, shout, see you in the gumbo, see you in the gumbo. Dance like nobody's there. See you in the gumbo, see you in the gumbo. This next piece is brief, and it's the title is what we say at Mardi Gras when we are begging for treats, beads from Mardi Gras parade floats. A chawa is a Black Indian street parade in the neighborhoods. There are Black warriors. And a penny party is a yard party where the entrance fee is by waist size. The title, Throw Me Something, Mister. Throw me something, mister. Throw me my pride in my step. Throw me my ancestors here so we can chawa and chat about them and now. Throw me my mother alive and well before age 50, dancing whole, doing dishes and trying to sing the Christmas song like Nat King Cole. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Throw me into a good penny party in the backyard when chunks of watermelon on a stick cold makes me forget it's 98 degrees in the shade. Throw me a tomorrow of equal humanity working together for a better life, a better planet, a better truth. Throw me into space, the galaxy glowing glad on God's love, picturing a peaceful earth from my left eye view. Throw me a penal system eclipsed of profit and promoting rehabilitation at the expense of voting rights. Throw me a new constitution that eliminates the Electoral College now, whose need is outdated by technology. They don't always vote with the people. Throw me a real for true American democracy where all the people's votes count. This one is a praise song for my sister, Barbara Ann, for my sister too. Sometimes I call her BAP, B-A-P, Black American Princess, she the beautiful, beating out Shirley Temple smiles at 5 years old, attending Martinez Black Creole preschool, speaking French, Spanish, skipping the first grade. But she recalls the turn when Daddy returned from World War II, a sergeant, a Black iron pot cook, a poet, hungry to hug his first girl. Sis asked Daddy, who are you? Threw her bread down on the gravel street in protest. And Daddy, fresh from seeing French kids eating rodents and begging for food, demanded she pick up that bread, eat it. Her Aries horns reared. She stood in her pride, then Daddy slapped her straight. Don't waste food. Because Mother sewed tropical seersucker suits by day, it was Sis who walked me through girlhood, assuring me I could keep swimming even when Jim Crow said no. Stuck with me as an audience, she doo-wopped with other 7th Ward Creole girls, danced at, oh, so many home and blue light backyard parties. Sis made Sputniks out of halved oranges with toothpicks and cheese perfectly cubed at the ends to Etta James, Fats Domino, or Bobby Blue Bland. Slow drags with handsome Black Creole boys of every hue and height. under mother's watchful eyes after daddy strung lights from fences for their fun after dark. In her prom photo, sis is pretty as a young Dorothy Dandridge or Lena Horne, and daddy, afraid for her beauty, still a heavy hand on her freedom. Summers we swam in water shows like Esther Williams. She and I always centered in a heart made of the best swimmers in Hardin Park. Each year, with glued sequins on our swim caps to grand applause from crowds around the city pool. She the beauty, me the athlete and geek reader. Both of us inhale good books, brain food for the senses and spirit. One day, she announced she was leaving, marrying a tall drinker hurricane, handsome too. Cut his 1955 Chevy into a sports car called Lizzie, with painted black footprints the size of my 12-year-old fingertips on the side mirror. She out of daddy's house for the West Coast, left one jail for another. Once mother died and daddy drowned his grief in booze, broads, drunken parties with strange men there for all the Jack Daniels they could drink. Peering into my bedroom once daddy's face fell flat into the Coubillon dinner I left for him. Had to go. Landed on my sister's doorstep with one bag and a new coat I bought with savings from lifeguarding or selling pleat and tuck pillows, hand sewed on Mother Singer's sewing machine. Stuck between scared and the next day, I cleaned, cooked their dinners, cared for my sweet nephew, washed and ironed their clothes, being useful and avoiding a future. My sister set me up for interviews with the activist son, Larry Gossett, of her postal co-worker friend, Miss Johnny. She made me go to college. So I went, kicking and screaming, then took to it like a catfish hugging river silt. By grace, I did more. Through 4 degrees, her hubby chided me, nigga, when you gonna get a real job? All the way, I sewed for big guys, Garfield Hurd, Bigfoot's Bob Lanier, Bob McAdoo, Globetrotters, boy bands. And sis sent me love boxes of beans, peas, stockings, priceless presents. She said, go ahead, you do what I couldn't, study. Once a PhD, brother-in-law tempered by fighting to stay in unions, to earn rightful pay for his journeyman sheet metal skills, and me working for the Research One, he shook his head. I did all right, he admitted. Well, my sister outlived the love of her life, survives cancer for the 3rd time in over 30 years, has 2 new knees that holler in airport security checks, a grown son, sweet friends, and we jazz fest each year in the Crescent City. These days, I call her Execusis, who fundraises for the Central District Senior Center on a hill overlooking Lake Washington. She chairs their board, escorts her elders to St. Therese Catholic Church for Sunday service, rides ferries in Puget Sound with her multicultural book club of ladies, all sisters. Today, when the neighborhood owls call morning to light, before the hum of interstate traffic rises, I have a dark cherry and soy smoothie, put on the decaf, with chicory, of course. Plan to pay something smooth by Gregory Porter, such as Painted on Canvas, one of our faves. And I give thanks for sister love in my life. And this is the last poem. It was the last poem in my first book. The title is We've Come This Far. It isn't hard to see how Africans in America embraced the Western church. God was no stranger. God woke up the day, cried over anger, calmed the nights with starlight, and gave Africans in America serenity as a shield. We suckled pink babies, didn't kill them. We turned cheeks, lowered our heads, but our hearts rose in spirit, volcanoes of culture. I walked among the hundreds of faces, humbled in the presence of peace. I've witnessed the meek, the 1,000 smiles of grace. Because God called, Negroes answered as Christian soldiers. Blacks took to Jesus like a crawfish to mud. God is no stranger in our homes. We are soldiers at war under divine charge. Prayer, the only down payment. Faith, the daily deposit. Whatever the cost of time God paid in death to Jim Crow, segregation, uncivil rights. Then affirmative cells furnished each generation, at least for those about the Lord's business. The constant cost, a listening heart to the greatest voice to echo. So we rap to the Lord regularly, consult on corners at church, and in the quiet of a look. We've come this far by faith. We've come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord, trusting in his holy word. He's never failed me yet. Oh, can't turn around. We've come this far by faith. Thank you.
I feel an amen is in order. Thank you so much. All of our contributors, all of the readers this evening, thank you ever so much. We have one question in the chat. I will only hold you another 5 minutes if you indulge me. The question in the chat is this: is there a difference today between Black literature and fiction? For instance, do you consider urban lit Black lit? So contributors, please feel free to unmute yourself and jump in and answer that question. Again, is there a difference today between Black literature and fiction? For instance, do you consider urban lit Black lit?
Yep. Yep. Toasting, ribbing, rapping, all of that's urban lit. Now there's different quality, but it's still Black lit.
I'm going to go so far as to also put graffiti in that. When I taught, they were, you know, my department chair would say, these kids don't read. And I'm like, well, why are they writing all over the world? They can't seem to find a spot to not put graffiti on. So somebody's reading something. I would like to refer to these as texts, plural. And thanks again for you all bringing in the folklore, the street rhymes, the clapping games. This is how we communicated with each other. By every word, every phrase, everything constitutes a language.
I'm a big, I like graphic novels and graphic essays. So I think of that as literature. I've read some crappy ones, but some of them are really, really good. I mean, evolving, they have great plots, you know, good characters. So, and those are the essential things for me. Like I said, I'll read anything. Sometimes I read because I haven't seen the thing before, and this is where so I make my acquaintance with it. But yeah, it's all about quality. I don't even know if it's totally about equality, quality as much as it is to have some kind of intention when you write, you know. And that's what I look for. Why is this person writing a story? But I like the graphic novels because I think that's a whole new way of writing essays, doing plays. You're going to see it a lot more.
Nora or Sharon?
I see urban lit and Black lit, I see as a Venn diagram, the circles that overlap each other. So I don't think that all of one is all of the other, but I think that there are places that they meet.
Urban lit can be used in fiction, certainly. So I agree with most of what's been said, that it does have value. and it is part of Black literature, but it can be used, if you're writing fiction, it can be used in it as an element. Just depend, or graphic novels, as you said, Levin. It depends on what you're writing. Or obviously poetry, Mona Lisa.
Okay, thank you so much. I know that your interest has been piqued this evening by what you've heard. You've just heard this much of what can be found in the Chicago Quarterly Review, issue number 33. So I know you're asking, well, how on earth do I get my hands on this? So I will turn it over to Gary, and he's going to let everyone know how you can obtain your very own copy of the Chicago Quarterly Review. Gary?
Thank you, Alicia. And by the way, if they'll reveal themselves, Saeed Hader and Elizabeth McKenzie are here also. They're our senior editors. Umberto Tosi has already revealed himself and just raised his hand. He's one of the contributing editors. How to get a hold of a copy? If you go to our website, Chicago Quarterly Review, and you find the anthology is pretty much close to the top of it, there is a purchase option which will take you to a page where you can order it. Now, we also have physical brick and mortar venues in our area, but there are only 3 of them right now. One of them is the Bookstall in Winnetka. Another one is Women and Children First Bookstore in Andersonville. And the third is a great store in Evanston called the Newsstand. I think it's on Main and what they call Chicago Avenue, an extension of what Chicagoans call Clark Street. So those are 3 places. Have we tried to get copies sold at other venues? We have, and we're still trying. So,
All right.
Okay, thank you for asking me that question too.
It's my pleasure. I know everybody wants to go out and get their own copy after spending the evening with these wonderful, wonderful contributors. So I thank you. I just took you over time just a teeny bit. I thank you ever so much for spending this evening with us, and we look forward to future programs and presentations. Congratulations to all of the authors this evening that were featured. Just phenomenal. Thank you so much. You all have a wonderful evening.
Bravo. Bravo. Thank you, everybody.